This free step-by-step video comes to you directly from Haynes, creators of the world's best repair manuals. Fix your car or truck the right way with our accurate and reliable information at your side. You can complete more than 200 jobs on this vehicle when you purchase the complete online manual at Haynes.com.
Water pump replacement, Ford Ranger. Pull the hood release lever located underneath the steering wheel. Lift the hood safety latch and raise the hood upwards. Support the hood with the prop rod. Loosen the cable clamp nut, then disconnect the negative battery cable from the terminal. Secure the cable aside to prevent accidental reconnection. With the engine completely cool, remove the radiator cap. To gain easier access to the radiator drain plug, it may be necessary to remove the radiator lower shield. Remove the bolts at each end of the shield, then remove the shield, prying out the push-pin fasteners as necessary. Move a large container under the radiator drain plug to catch the coolant. Attach a small hose to the drain fitting to direct the coolant into the container. Then open the drain fitting with an Allen wrench. Allow the coolant in the radiator to drain completely. While the coolant is draining, check the condition of the radiator hoses, heater hoses, and clamps. Replace any damaged clamps or hoses before refilling the cooling system. Once the coolant has finished draining, tighten the radiator drain plug securely. Remove the hose from the drain tap. Install the lower radiator shield. Tighten the bolts securely. Dispose of the used coolant properly. Remove the cover mounting bolts, then lift off the air intake and throttle body cover. Loosen the intake tube hose clamps at each end. Disconnect the crankcase ventilation hose from the intake air tube. Then remove the intake air tube. Disconnect the coolant reservoir overflow hose from the radiator filler neck. Using a special cooling fan wrench and something to prevent the water pump pulley from turning, loosen the cooling fan nut. Unscrew the cooling fan from the water pump pulley shaft. Remove the screws securing the fan shroud to the radiator. Lift the cooling fan together with the shroud out of the engine compartment. Loosen, but don't remove, the water pump pulley bolts from the drive belt still installed. Disconnect and remove the crankcase ventilation hose from the valve cover. Disconnect the alternator electrical connectors. Peel back the protective cover, then remove the nut securing the battery positive cable to the alternator. Disconnect the cable from the alternator and position the harness aside. Note how the drive belt is routed among the various pulleys. To remove the drive belt, rotate the tensioner pulley counterclockwise, then slip the belt off of an accessible pulley. Slowly rotate the tensioner to its stopping point. Remove the belt from the various pulleys and out of the engine compartment. Detach the wiring harness clip from the alternator. Remove the alternator mounting bolts. Remove the alternator. Remove the drive belt tensioner mounting bolt. Then, remove the tensioner. Remove the mounting bolts for the alternator bracket, then remove the bracket. Remove the power steering pump and AC compressor bracket bolts. Lift the bracket off of the engine and position the bracket assembly away from the water pump. Tie up the bracket assembly with the length of a wire to prevent the assembly from falling downward and causing any potential damage to the power steering or AC lines. Remove the mounting bolts, then remove the water pump pulley. Slide back the clamps and detach the hoses from the water pump. If the hoses are deteriorated, cut them off. Clean the mating pipe surface and install new ones of the correct size. Remove the water pump mounting bolts. Note the locations of the various lengths and different types of bolts as they're removed to ensure correct installation. Detach the water pump from the engine. Clean the new water pump mating surface, then apply a thin layer of RTV sealant to the gasket mating surface of the new pump. Then carefully mate the gasket to the pump. Remove all traces of old gasket material from the engine gasket surface. For easier installation of the water pump, the engine, first install the short coolant hose to the upper coolant port of the water pump. Secure the hose with a clamp. Install the water pump to the engine, first inserting the short upper hose onto the bottom thermostat housing coolant port. Carefully mate the water pump against the engine. Then thread in the mounting bolts finger tight. Tighten the water pump mounting bolts evenly in a crisscross pattern to the specified torque setting in 1/4 turn increments. Don't over-tighten the bolts or the pump may be distorted. Secure the upper hose with the hose clamp on the thermostat housing side. Reconnect the remaining hoses to the water pump and secure them with the hose clamps. If the wiring harness above the water pump was detached from the studs, reattach the harness to the studs. Install the power steering pump and AC compressor bracket assembly to the engine and thread in the mounting bolts. Tighten the mounting bolts to the specified torque setting. Install the alternator bracket to the engine. Tighten the alternator mounting bracket to engine bolts to the specified torque setting. Install the water pump pulley and mounting bolts. Delay tightening these bolts to the specified torque setting until the drive belt is installed. Install the drive belt tensioner. Tighten the mounting bolt to the specified torque setting. Tighten the water pump pulley bolts to the specified torque setting. Install the alternator onto the mounting bracket, then thread in the mounting bolts. Tighten the alternator mounting bolts to the specified torque setting. Attach the wiring harness clip to the alternator bracket. Connect the battery positive cable to the alternator. Screw on the cable nut and tighten it securely. Secure the terminal with the protective cover. Connect the remaining alternator electrical connectors. Connect the crankcase ventilation hose to the valve cover. Loosely install the drive belt onto the pulleys in the correct routing. Rotate the tensioner to allow the belt to be slipped onto the remaining pulley. Then release the tensioner, applying tension to the belt. Inspect the belt at each pulley and make sure that the belt is fitted evenly into all the pulley grooves. Tighten the water pump pulley bolts to the specified torque setting. Install the cooling fan and shroud into the engine. Align the tabs on the side of the shroud into the slots on the radiator. Screw the cooling fan onto the water pump threaded shaft. Install the fan shroud mounting bolts and tighten the bolts securely. Using a special cooling fan nut tool set, tighten the fan nut to the specified torque setting. Connect the coolant reservoir overflow hose to the radiator filler neck. Install the intake air tube to the filter housing and throttle body. Connect the crankcase ventilation hose to the intake tube. Tighten the hose clamps securely at each side, but avoid over-tightening them. Install the throttle body cover. Tighten the cover bolts securely. Connect the negative battery cable to the terminal and tighten the cable clamp nut securely. Cooling system filling. Turn the heater temperature control to the maximum heat position. Slowly fill the radiator with the correct type of mixture of antifreeze up to the base of the radiator filler neck. The coolant level may drop slightly after filling the radiator, so keep adding coolant to the radiator until the coolant remains level with the filler neck base. Set the radiator cap loosely onto the filler neck, but do not fully install yet. Start the engine and run it in a well-ventilated area until the thermostat opens. Coolant will begin flowing through the radiator and the upper radiator hose will become hot. Turn off the engine and let it cool down. Slowly remove the radiator cap and recheck the coolant level, adding more as necessary to bring the level up to the base of the filler neck. After adding coolant, squeeze the upper radiator hose to expel any air in the system. Then top up with more coolant mixture if necessary. Install the radiator cap securely. Add coolant to the reservoir up to the lower mark. Start the engine, allow it to reach normal operating temperature once again, and check for leaks.